Action.
Welcome to the Tibet Center at 151 West 30th Street. So we will begin tonight by reciting the prayer for the spreading of the teachings throughout the length and breadth of the West, which you will find in the FAQ section down below on the front page. Scroll down to prayers. By the force of the blessings of the non-fallacious three precious gems, and of the truth of our pure selfless wishes, may the precious Buddha's teachings flourish and spread throughout the length and breadth of the West. For all the people living there, together with their near ones, who have engaged in the teachings and have faith and respect for them, may all conditions adverse to the practice of the pure Dharma be dispelled, and an excellent collection of favorable conditions increase like the waxing moon. And especially for those who work on methods to accomplish the flourishing and spreading of the victorious one's teachings, which are the source of benefit and happiness, may they never be oppressed by masses of interference and adverse conditions, and may this spontaneously happen just as we have hoped and wished. Now the Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard once, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of the Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a big gathering of great monks and great bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi, which examines the Dharmas, called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, "How should those noble ones learn who wish to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge?" And Avalokiteshvara answered, "Venerable Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this, seeing the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is not separate from form, form is not separate from emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discriminating awareness, compositional factors in consciousness are empty. Thus, all the dharmas are empty and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discriminating awareness, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no objects of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of hearing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There are no nidanas from ignorance to old age and death, nor their wearing out. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge. And since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear, they transcend falsity and pass beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future, by means of transcendent knowledge, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering, should be known as truth, there is no deception. In transcendent knowledge, the mantra is proclaimed. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. O Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn profound transcendent knowledge. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, profound transcendent knowledge should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, that whole gathering in the world with its gods, humans, asuras and Gandharvas, their hearts full of joy, praised the words of the Blessed One. And now we generate bodhicitta. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So, as we've been doing for the last, recently, let's do one rosary of Om Mani Padme Hums, the mantra of compassion. So, as you recite Om Mani Padme Hum, try to think of compassion, try to generate that wish to remove the suffering of others. Compassion is not removing the suffering of others, it's developing the wish to remove the suffering of others. And so as you recite, think of how just as I am suffering, others are suffering, just as I have difficulties, others do, and you develop that wish to remove their suffering. And think about how dependent we are on others. These are the thoughts that bring about that wish to remove the suffering of others. Okay. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Hum. So, welcome. And since we've just recited Om Mani Padme Hum, and since we've been thinking about compassion, I think that it's important as we consider compassion while reciting. The most important thing is not the recitation of Om Mani Padme Hum. It's our thought. It's developing that wish to remove the suffering of others. And in order to truly develop that wish, for it not to just be, oh, I wish all others weren't suffering, but to have it really be real, we have to first of all clearly recognize our own suffering. It's a prerequisite to developing true compassion that we recognize, acknowledge, but truly recognize our own state of suffering. And we're not here, we have to really think about not just the suffering, the sort of grosser aspects of suffering that we hit ourselves or things like that. Someone hits us, physical suffering, or even sort of intense emotional suffering. That is something we evidently wish to remove ourselves from. But the more subtle suffering of change, the suffering that happens after we've experienced pleasure, the fact that whatever happiness, whatever good things we experience come to an end. And so that we can think that even built into the pleasures that we experience is the suffering that comes about when we no longer are experiencing that pleasure. But most importantly, we should identify with our what they call the all-pervasive suffering of conditioning. And that's the suffering that accompanies us as long as we are within cyclic existence, as long as we are the victims of our ignorant belief in self, as we cling to a sense of self, and as we wish to protect it, and as we wish to remove anything that challenges it, as we identify with ourselves as being somehow independently, truly, inherently existent, it is that quality of being which is this all-pervasive suffering. And so to truly have the compassion that wishes to remove that quality of suffering from others, we have to recognize it in ourselves. And so the cultivation of compassion must go through these different levels of suffering that we are experiencing. And so that's something that, if you read about what suffering is, the Buddha, the first thing that the Buddha taught upon attaining enlightenment was the noble truth of suffering. The first of the Four Noble Truths, which are part of the first teaching that the Buddha gave, is the truth of suffering. And so it's essential, it's fundamental. It is only by recognizing our own suffering that we have any motivation to enter a spiritual path. I don't know that engaging in the pursuit of enlightenment or freedom from suffering would mean anything if we didn't begin by acknowledging, recognizing the fact that we are actually in a state of suffering. And that recognition of the state of suffering that we are in has to be profound. It has to be, or a recognition of the profound quality of suffering. It can't just be the sort of grosser elements. It really has to go all the way down to a recognition of the most subtle form of suffering that we are experiencing, which is this all-pervasive quality of suffering. The other thing that we have to do is recognize our dependence on others. And we can begin by thinking of, here we are sitting in this room very comfortably, very nicely, but everything that we are experiencing is due to the kindness of others. Someone made the wooden planks that make up the floor. Someone made the structure of this place. Someone made, everything was done. I've been given all these different forms of liquid. A lot of work went into each one of these, in addition to each of you who brought them, your having brought them. Everything that we experience is due to so many people's contribution in some way. And the more we recognize this, the more we recognize our dependence on others, their kindness towards us, whether they're aware of it or not, the more our hearts will open towards our recognition that they are suffering just the way we are. We all know that, if a friend of ours is suffering, we will really feel great empathy, great sadness. We will have a very profound feeling if our mother or our sister or brother is suffering. But if it's someone far away, we'll think, oh, poor thing. We won't have that sort of strong feeling of compassion towards them. So we have to work at developing that, and we have to work at recognizing how dependent we are on others, and then how they're suffering just the way I am. Those are the elements that cause or bring about compassion. So when we recite Om Mani Padme Hum, those steps, those thoughts are necessary to bring about some kind of a feeling of compassion. They say that there are these two forms of meditation. There's the what's it called? The analytical form of meditation, and then there's the single-pointed or placement meditation. And so it is said that we should spend far more time engaged in the analytical. The analytical, the process of reading and contemplating, these things will change our minds. These things will, it's a process of applying thought and then logic to what we read or what we hear that brings about a recognition of, that's true, that's right, and that brings about real change. It's when we've established something as being correct that we have faith in it, that we can really invest in that other way of thinking, that new way of thinking. Then we have to work at deepening it or having it sort of be absorbed more. And so in meditating on compassion, for example, once you've conjured up some feeling of compassion, some recognition of the suffering of others that is just like the suffering I have, a recognition of my dependence on others, then we have this wish to have them be free of that suffering. That you try to hold on to without thinking for a little while, a few seconds, but you try to have it actually permeate your consciousness for some time without thinking. You're not applying the thought process. You just hold on to that. And you feel the compassion. And then it'll go. And then you start thinking again. And so that's how we should mix these two forms of meditation applied to compassion. And the reason I talk about compassion specifically is that we could say that the truly, spiritual quality of our practice, what establishes one as really walking a spiritual path, is the degree to which he or she, we, have thoughts towards others rather than towards ourselves, have concern for others rather than ourselves. And so we can take compassion as being the line. And I think it's a good line for us to consider in our lives as we go about our lives. To what degree am I thinking about, am I devoted to others rather than myself? And I know that if I sit and think about it, I'd say that 99.9% of my thoughts are devoted to pleasing myself. And so I have to work at it. And if I sit and think about it, as we've just done for a few minutes, that in itself brings it down to 99.98. And like that. And that's what we're doing. They talk about the meditators who are trying to control their minds, keeping their minds from thinking negative thoughts, which I think are sort of selfish thoughts. And so they sit in their cave and they put a black mark on the wall for every negative thought. And for the beginning of their meditations, the cave is black. And then slowly there are a few little white marks, and that's the process that we're on. And that's really what this path is, I think, about. And what's interesting about what we've been studying, Beyond Religion, Ethics for a Whole World by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is that he's trying to convey this in a purely secular way. Though, of course, he is a Buddhist master, Buddhist monk, trained in his spiritual tradition according to the teachings of the Buddha. He's really worked hard to present an ethical practice, an ethical path that has no religious, dogmatic elements to it. He tries to present the logic in behaving well, in working towards developing a concern for others rather than for oneself. And he presents two sort of basic elements that have to be worked on. One is the cultivation of compassion, a cultivation of concern for others, and that's something that is inside one. In other words, as I said at the beginning, it's not that compassion is the removal of others' suffering. Compassion is the development of the wish to remove the suffering of others. So it's something within ourselves. The cultivation of compassion is a cultivation of my attitude towards how I go about my life, rather than the actual implementation of that attitude or motivation. So it's not that, I'm not saying that we don't actually act to help others, but compassion is that inner quality. When we work at compassion, we work at developing that feeling of responsibility towards, that love for, and that wish to remove the suffering of others. I remember being at some conference in Bangalore, and we were discussing compassion, and someone said, well, how about compassion for yourself? And I permitted myself to say, that's not compassion. that's in terms of our spiritual aspiration, the recognition of our own suffering and the wish to remove that is what leads us towards a path that is devoted to attaining freedom from our suffering. But the development of compassion is one that is devoted to developing the wish to remove others from their suffering. Now, I know that in sort of contemporary thinking, there seems to be attention given to validity attributed to developing compassion for oneself. But I don't think that's really compassion. I think that a recognition of our suffering and a wish to be free of our suffering leads us to developing the compassion that wishes that others be free of suffering. So that's one element, and as I say, that's sort of in ourselves. The other is developing the skills, the ability, the knowledge of how to implement that compassion. So that's that has a whole domain of practices that we would implement to help others out of their sufferings. But the quality that we have to develop in order to do that is a discernment. Discernment is the word that His Holiness uses in this book, but it's a wisdom that knows how to actually engage in the process of helping others to remove their suffering. So I'll as a Buddhist sitting here talking about this, one of the things that we are taught and we have to contemplate and we have to sort of come to an acknowledgement of is that we can't really remove the sufferings of others. I mean, yes, if someone is sick, a doctor can prescribe medicine and a nurse can help the person. There are sort of practical ways of helping people with the suffering of suffering. So the grossest element of suffering. But the truly the true elements of suffering that we're talking about this evening are elements of suffering that we have to work on ourselves to remove. It is said that the Buddha cannot remove our suffering. The Buddha can simply teach us the path by which we can remove our own suffering. So I just throw that in there in this conversation about compassion and the removal of and developing the wish to remove the suffering of others. Okay, so we have, according to what I see, we have gotten to page 91 in this. The problem of greed versus the joys of philanthropy. So, in today's, for those of you who are in class out in New Jersey on Monday, we covered this. We're sort of slightly overlapping. You were there on Monday? No, you were. Wednesday, sorry. Today's Monday?
Where do you go?
So, in today's materialistic world, there is a trend of people becoming slaves to money, as though they are parts of a huge money-making machine. A friend of mine told me of she and her family were having financial difficulty, and she was with her daughter, little daughter, and she said to the daughter, well, we're having financial difficulty. And the daughter said, well, that's okay, just go to the cash machine. The money comes right out. So I do think that we live in a time where our situation, our financial situation is maybe our relationship to it has been changed from the sort of basic reality that it used to be, and people are, as this says, part of a huge money-making machine, or there are so many who are not part of that huge money-making machines, and they suffer. This does nothing for human dignity, freedom, and genuine well-being. Wealth should serve humanity and not vice versa. The massive disparities of wealth now apparent in the world, disparities that are more extreme than ever before and are still growing, are very distressing. The stark economic inequalities of today's world, not just between global north and global south, but between rich and poor within individual nations, are not only morally wrong, but sources of many practical problems, including war, sectarian violence, and the social tensions created by large-scale economic migration. On the issue of economic inequality, I consider myself at least half Marxist. When it comes to creating wealth and thereby improving people's material conditions, capitalism is without doubt very effective, but capitalism is clearly inadequate as any kind of social ideal, since it is only motivated by profit without any ethical principle guiding it. Unbridled capitalism can involve terrible exploitation of the weak. Thus, we need to adopt an approach to economic justice which respects the dynamism of capitalism while combining it with a concern for the less fortunate. Okay. What do you have to say? I'm throwing it open to discussion. This is very political, and but leaving the sort of political aspect aside, we're not here. This is not like a class on how to engage politically and how to figure out how to mix a Marxist quality of equality with a capitalist technique for generating wealth. These are not things that there are those of you who might be involved in either one of those two. These are qualities that we have to work at balancing within ourselves. This is really we should think of this more as like a spiritual or meditation manual. So these are qualities that I have to work at developing some kind of a, let's say, Marxist attitude towards a concern for others. If I look at myself and I look at all others, I'm inconsequential. And I have to acknowledge that. And it's not that my efforts are going to have much influence on all others, but I have to work at it. I have to make my effort towards contributing to the greater good. And I have to do it using techniques that are effective, those capitalistic. So, how do we do it?
First problem is the extreme, which never was when I was younger. Very, very wealthy, very poor. They figured out how to exploit people from all over the world now, bring down wages here. The idea that comes from the fact that you're not recognizing the humanity of all the players. You don't care about this one. This woman has enough to eat, just enough to get by. People don't care, and they use their influence to enact these laws that make it increasingly difficult for poorer people to live, or middle class people to live in this. It's rough. They're not recognizing the humanity, and that's an inner problem.
So what do I do?
Well, what you're doing. I mean, there's no better job in the world than what you're doing. Ask for humanity. It's a Mahayana attitude.
Reflect on the suffering of change. So I think capitalism really, you can say, is a whole blossoming of the belief that pleasure, which is by its nature impermanent, is real pleasure.
Good point.
Is kind of the basis of the whole thing.
Keep over.
And the acquisition of worldly goods is a direct path to happiness. So I saw a small clip about a 90-year-old woman who lost not only her home but her rental properties that were her income in the fires. And she is saying, I will be very mindful and careful about everything that I acquire, about everything that I buy. And isn't it really cool to start over again at 90? So, if we consider every expenditure or every engagement in the economic system, food or clothing or books or shelter, rather than just filling the closet with things that you'll never wear. That might be a beginning of change starting with one person.
Okay.
Mindfulness. The idea that you said that material things don't give happiness and wealth. That's the big one.
Someone explained once that a chain is only as in capitalism, the chain is only as strong as its strongest link. In socialism, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
Still a chain.
I don't understand that.
Well, the rich in the capitalist chain, the most powerful are the links are, they're the ones who decide everything. And the socialist ones, people, it's only as strong as the weakest link.
Because everyone has to be equal.
Because of compassion.
Not equal, but I think it's just the way they each take care of things.
There's less traditional religion than before. So there was some shame to showing off your wealth. That seems to have gone away.
When his Holiness came in 2013, there was a big press conference and he said he was a Marxist.
Yeah,
and
right.
Fox News called, or,
Oh, that's all after his.
but we weren't there, we didn't pick up. They left a message.
So, I want to bring it, we're talking theoretically here, and I think that we have to figure out how to make this relevant to me, you. What's important in considering this is what we sit and think about when we contemplate, when we meditate. What is the method by which I contribute to the alleviation of the problems? What can I actually do? It has to be an inner thing. It has to be.
Mark said, meditate on the uselessness of acquiring things, more or less. Because you're thinking that's all, first of all, educate yourself that ultimate happiness ain't buying something or showing off.
Well,
You have
but-
more than you. That's,
But the moment where you have that feeling of discomfort or ill at ease, and you go shop because it will
well,
push that away and move it away.
shops for
So-
the drugs.
Well, sitting with the vague awareness of suffering, of dissatisfaction, of the suffering of impermanence, that is alleviated by distraction, whether it's media or shopping or eating. So learning to be uncomfortable,
Being aware of your depression and how you,
or
what you're really doing. You don't need the extra shoes, but there's an impulse control.
It's like, it's going to snow. Gosh, my old snow boots might not be waterproof. Let me buy a new pair, you know?
You really need your
And-
Two new pairs would be better because
And they've come, and I don't have the time, and I can't take them home. I haven't taken them home. They're still sitting in the box at my day job. I don't have time to even try them on. So it's like, just send them back. You know, just send them back.
so. But let's go further. So there are two aspects of this. One is we do need to make the money that enables us to survive. So we do need to apply that, sort of individual capitalistic attitude. We have to, train ourselves to do a job that supports us. We have to, and yet we also have to work at developing contentment, I think, is the thing, what the attitude that we have to work on. There's someone asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama, said, you're a holy being who is meant to have attained a level where you wouldn't have attachments, and yet you have many, many little Sony radios, shortwave. This is in the past, in the time of shortwave radios. And he smiled. I think I've told this a number of times. And he said, "Oh, I have, it's true, a radio next to my bed, and a radio next to where I meditate, and a radio in my office, and a radio in my home office, and a radio where I eat, and a radio where I sit and read, and even a radio in the toilet." And he said, and they're all set to the BBC News, and they're all so that I can push the button and know what's happening in the world. and know about the suffering that's being experienced here or there, whatever. There's no attachment to the radios. So the element, so there's, I think it's important to recognize that there is nothing wrong with radios. Or cameras, yes. You're right. The problem is with attachment. And if the radios are the tools by which we are able to maintain an awareness and knowledge of what's happening in the world, the radios are very valuable tools. And so I think it's important as we go about these kinds of thoughts to remember that. But to recognize that we don't need an extra this or a that, and develop the contentment necessary to really keep ourselves from indulging in those thoughts that really upset us and create our contribution to the problems that are being mentioned here. I don't think it's just a question of contentment towards acquiring, it's a contentment towards our relationship to so many of the things that we are surrounded by, little things that tickle our senses.
Now that I think about that, so that it's not only materials or money that we are after, also the capitalistic being the, making lots of money. It came to my mind that comes also with the feeling of power, or like a reputation or image that come from that we get attached to reputation or image that I'm wealthy, I have this title. And it seems like that also contribute to the problem, not just for the material.
So how do we deal with that one?
The reputation and a good image, recognize the attachment, and that doesn't bring happiness. It seems like there's a happiness in the image, good image, but it's not there. Also, what he said, maybe it's suffering of change. You want more. It never ends. The good image. Because it's also now good image depends on other people's opinions.
Good image depends on someone appreciating it, yeah. So it depends.
And as we think about this, when we go through our contemplation of such things, we have to remember that there's nothing wrong with situations of power in and of themselves. I mean, one can do a lot of good. It's the attitude towards it. It's the wish for it that sets us up to be unhappy. It's the way we may actually implement that power that brings problems. And but having a certain authority that can bring good.
I recognize when you mentioned that His Holiness is an example, the radio, and I realized, His Holiness is actually has this big title, but he doesn't act. He's not active. He doesn't act.
Shabby David said you can't eat reputation if you're hungry. You can't do all those things we talked
So
about.
thoughts like that, you can't, it doesn't
It won't keep you warm in the cold, your reputation. It won't feed you. What use is it after you die and all that, all those little points. But the people have to examine that. We all have to do it. And we forget because nobody, we just get pushed away. The energy of life. That's rough.
So later in this book on page 143, His Holiness actually discusses
Page 143.
on my earliest trips to Western countries, I sometimes used to visit shopping malls. In those days, there were no such malls in India, and it was impressive to us Tibetans to see all the smart shops with their window displays lit up with all kinds of consumer products. Ever since childhood, I have had a love of mechanical objects like watches. So I found the modern mechanical and electronic gadgets in those stores most attractive. Looking at them, I would sometimes think, oh, I would like this, I would like that. But then I would ask myself, do I really need it? Of course, most of the time the answer was no. So my first thoughts were coming from some kind of instinctive greed. But as soon as I checked myself and took a realistic view, I no longer felt any need to acquire or control those items. This is what I understand by the application of contentment. So this, he's given us an example of just how we have to think. And it's not so much that, you know, it's not just when we go into a shop and see things, but our minds go in all sorts of directions without having physically having gone anywhere, and we have to catch ourselves. I think that, you know, with with these things and the way they pull us here and there, we have to apply the same thing. We have to just recognize that we don't need whatever it is that it's pulling us towards, that we can just be content. So this is applicable.
Like instinctive greed. So we have a force in us that's pushing us that way, and he becomes aware of it.
So
It's realistic
instinctive greed
versus realistic.
comes from a belief that the object has some kind of intrinsic quality, that there is something inherently good about it, and that quality of inherent existence of the object that we see, that quality of inherent existence appears to our, you know, when the eye sees this is a Rode, is that how you pronounce it? Microphone. And if one knew anything about microphones, which my friend Darren here does, you look at it and you say, oh, that's a Rode microphone. Microphone. And you say, oh, that has quality. And it's the roadness of it, that appears to us, that then pulls us towards it. And one technique that we can use individually is a recognition that there is no roadness to this Rode microphone. That when we break it up, we realize that Rode is a mere name applied to a bunch of parts, that there's no inherent quality to this. It's merely imputed upon the parts. And that'll break down our feeling of attachment. And it'll help us maintain an attitude that this is a tool. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. I hope the light's still on, yes. It's serving a purpose. It's a tool. So we're not judging things. We're judging our attitude towards things. And I say that because what I've just said, we're not judging things, we're judging our attitude towards things, is an attitude that we have to develop in ourselves in meditation on our own. Anything else? So how do we develop, so we've been developing the Marxist side, how do we develop the capitalistic, what would you call it, skillful means for actually making society work?
I would say, would be a guess, that it would be a good idea to establish first what works for people and what doesn't, and then teach it to young children. Because without education, we don't know much of anything. So in the future, it might be incumbent upon us to form schools where children are taught about empathy and about compassion and about sharing and about deliberating on how to best serve themselves and others.
So, in addition to writing this and the prior book, which was called Secular Ethics, Ethics
For the New Millennium.
for the New Millennium, His Holiness the Dalai Lama funded the development of a curriculum for teaching ethics in schools, which was developed by the Education Department at Emory University, and which is now available for free throughout the world to apply in schools, and it's developed in different languages. And I know that in India there are different schools that have actually been applying it. In Canada, for the last 30-something years, there are certain areas of Canada where they have made teaching secular ethics part of the curriculum, and they've been able to track over 30 years the effects that this has had on people as they've gone through their education and then gone into their lives. So yes.
Don't the Montessori, doesn't the Montessori system, no?
I don't know.
Oh,
I have no children. I don't have. I don't know.
Eugene's son takes courses, is given that in the public school in New Jersey, how to share, how to break conflict, how to walk with all that from this type of program. So it's actually in business now. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, even magnets, it exists in the magnet schools.
In the
They call it magnet schools.
The New York
magnet
system.
school.
Yeah, they call it magnet schools. It's a little bit more open-minded, and they listen to the children too. So once you listen to them, they listen to you, and there is empathy. So
Ooh.
yeah, so there is example. It's actually starting by the teaching. The teachers are the examples of empathy, and then it's just happening on its own. And then of course when there is discussion, there is the considering the other person, which is passion.
That's good news.
Yeah, that's magnet schools.
Magnet schools in New York City.
Yeah, and Brooklyn, definitely in Brooklyn.
So a magnet school, do they get special students there, or?
Yeah, you have to sign especially for that. It's not a regular public school, but it is public. Yeah. My son was in that type of school. Yeah.
Positive results? So, then something.
It's a life.
Not around you, it's probably a great guy outside.
Oh, it's
the
pretty,
house.
it's pretty, it's pretty, yeah. But when you know with the mother, it's always different.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, but it's, it's there, yeah,
Glad to hear.
yeah. And the children can also express themselves emotionally more than the regular school, which is kind of nice.
I heard the term, and I've applied a meaning to it.
So that brings us to an end of this.
Midtown discussion. Well, you can, yeah, you can have it.
So
translated Shanghai Diet. Spend that year.
High body,
Sorry?
high body, Britain's name.
So we usually think people give us names of people who recently passed away, whom we pray for, and there are many who have recently died in the earthquake in Tibet, in the fires on the West Coast, in Los Angeles, and many other parts of the world. So let us remember them as we recite the Sutra of the recollection of the Noble Three Jewels. I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus the Buddha, Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the charioteer and tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of devas and humans is the Buddha Bhagavat. And the Tathagata is in accord with all merit, grace the root of virtue. He is completely ornamented with all patience. He is the basis of the treasures of the merit. He is adorned with the minor marks. He blossoms with the flowers of the major marks. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who long with faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strength cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the father of bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the guide of those who journey to the city of nirvana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. He possesses inconceivable confidence. His speech is completely pure. His melody is pleasing. One never has enough of seeing him. His form is incomparable. He is not stained by the realm of desire. He is not stained by the realm of form. He is not affected by the formless realm. He is completely liberated from suffering. He is completely and utterly liberated from the skandhas. He is not possessed with dhatus. His ayatanas are controlled. He is completely cut the knots. He is completely liberated from extreme torment. He is liberated from craving. He has crossed over the river. He is perfected in the wisdoms. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavat, so rise in the past, present, and future. He does not abide in wonder. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells on the bhumi where he sees all sentient beings. All these are the perfect virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. The Holy Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent. Its words are excellent. It is uncorrupted. It is completely perfect and completely pure. It completely purifies. The Bhagavat teaches the Dharma well. It brings complete vision. It is free from sickness. It is always timely. It directs one further. Seeing it fulfills one's purpose. It brings discriminating insight for the wise. The Dharma which is taught by the Bhagavat is revealed properly in the night. It is renunciation. It causes one to arrive at perfect enlightenment. It is without contradiction. It is pithy. It is trustworthy and puts an end to the journey. As for the Sangha of the great Yana, they enter completely. They enter insightfully. They enter straightforwardly. They enter harmoniously. They are worthy of veneration with joined palms. They are worthy of receiving prostration. They are a field of glorious merit. They are completely capable of receiving all gifts. They are an object of generosity. They are a great object of complete generosity. The protector who possesses great kindness, the omniscient teacher, the basis of oceans of merit and virtue. I prostrate to the Bhagavata. Pure, the cause of freedom from passion, virtuous, liberating from the lower realms. This alone is the supreme ultimate truth. I prostrate to the Dharma which is peace. Having been liberated, they show the path to liberation. They are fully dedicated to the disciplines. They are a holy field of merit and possess virtue. I prostrate to the Sangha. I prostrate to the Buddha teacher. I prostrate to the Dharma, the protector. I prostrate to the Son of the community. I prostrate respectfully in all ways to these three. The Buddha's virtues are inconceivable. The Dharma's virtues are inconceivable. The Sangha's virtues are inconceivable. Having faith in these inconceivables, therefore their fruitions are inconceivable. May they be born in a completely pure world. We read the 8 verses for chanting the Dharma. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest among all, and respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings, as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others, out of jealousy, treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer the victory to them. When the one whom I have benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone without exception all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all sufferings of others. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena like illusions, be released from the bondage of attachment. Now we read a prayer for a swift return of KHENSUR RINPOCHE. Exalted wisdom of all victors gathered in a drop, sole refuge manifest in the form of the one wearing saffron robes, Guru Lobsang Tulang Toji-chan. Please bear witness here today that our prayers may be fulfilled. We beseech the great torch of doctrine, accomplishing from long ago the vast way of aspirational prayers. Lord of speech of the victor Lobsang's teachings, spreading them to the ends of the earth by means of explanation and practice. Though holding the commitment, I will invite all beings to be my guests in unsurpassed great awakening, yet you have withdrawn the activities of the form body that serve the welfare of others. Is that the worthy of the supreme among beings, the Bodhisattvas? Though impossible for you till cyclic existence end, to abandon your commitment to liberate all beings, we beseech the new son of Nirmanakaya to swiftly return from the realm of Dharmakaya, brought forth by Bodhicitta, drawn by 7 steeds. Having reached the far limits of scholarship, religious life, and goodness, please come swiftly as an unrivaled supreme emanation, full holder of the sage's teachings, and wish-fulfilling jewel, returns the glory of Losang Tenpe. Magnificent truth of the 3 precious jewels, Mahakala, Karma, Yama, and Srimati Devi, and the ocean of Dharma protectors, may you spontaneously fulfill our wish, the swift blossoming of the reincarnation's fresh moonlight face.
Thank you. Thank you.
So our next class will be in South Orange, New Jersey on Monday, Wednesday, day after tomorrow. Okay, and next Saturday, not this, next Saturday there's no Tara.
No terror.
It's the Saturday after that.
Every